Brothers and sisters, I'm at another shrine of a saint that I heard about last year, but really has come into my life more so in the last couple of months. And I watched a film about her life, and she's another Lebanese saint, Saint Rafqa. And her life just really touched me. She suffered so much. First of all, I'll just say a little bit about her own life, that her mother Rafqa died, and so her father was very poor and couldn't afford to upkeep her, and he had to go and ask this more wealthier family if she can go and do like some housework, but they can treat her like a daughter, and they did. They treated her very well. After many years, she returned back to her town, and it was there that she discovered her father had remarried, and she, you know, she was very amicable to the new lady that his father married. But that lady, as well as her mother's sister, had plans for her to marry, and there was a big clash between them. They both had their own ideas and plans for Rafqa, but Rafqa in her heart wanted to give herself only to Christ, and from a young age she had vowed this to Christ, and she found herself in a great conflict. And when she overheard them one day fighting in conflict, she decided to go and pray, and she said, "No, Lord, I want only you." And she went and consulted a local priest because she was in a bit of confusion whether she should enter a purely contemplative order or she should be an apostolic sister in the world teaching, etc. And this very wise priest said, "You know, Rafqa, when in contemplation, you're with Jesus, but when you're with people, you're also with Jesus." And so she went one day in great kind of confusion before I believe it was an image of Our Lady, and she just prayed, and she heard Our Lady's voice, "Rafqa, you will be a nun." And so she heard it audibly, and so she went, and she knew that she was to be a sister. So she went and she became a religious sister who was helping lots of kids in the village and stuff with catechism, and she worked very hard. But she also gave great time of her life to prayer. And it was in this whole situation that she found herself one day when the Turks, I believe, were invading, and she protected a lot of the children from the attackers. Then eventually her religious order, that community, was falling apart for different reasons, and they gave them the option either to return to the world in terms of like take up ordinary jobs, or that they were to continue maybe in religious life, choosing another order. And it was there that Rafqa again began a confusion. Am I, Lord, called to continue serving you as a nun? Should she join a more purely contemplative order, or should she go to a more apostolic order of sisters? And it was there that, you know, for her it was no choice. She was going to keep her vows regardless. But then she went down again, and she heard the audible voice of God, which directed her in terms of a life of contemplation. And so she entered an enclosed order, and I'm here right now with the monastery of St. Joseph, which is in Batroun in Lebanon. And as you could see, it is really beautiful. You could hear the birds. It's up on the mountain. You could see the ocean in the background. It's really beautiful. And here's St. Rafqa, and behind her there is her tomb. So Rafqa, there are many things from her life that we could say. She came into the monastery, and again, she was so restless. She wanted more and more to give God. She got in the middle of the night, she went before a crucifix of Christ, and she said, "Christ, I want to give you more of your heart. Let me suffer for you for souls." Most of us do not ask God to suffer, because who wants to suffer? But this is a mystical thing, a grace welling up in our heart to participate deeply with Christ, because St. Paul says that we're called to make up what is lacking in the cross of Christ. Not that Jesus lacked anything, but Jesus also invites us to be with him. He wants to share everything with us, his goodness, the love of the Father, but even his sufferings. And that's it. When we love someone, we do suffer with them, and we enter into some really deep participation in what they're suffering. Think of a mother with a suffering child. She feels what the child suffers. And so Rafqa wanted that. She wanted to experience the cross. And the Lord took her seriously, and she ended up blind, and she ended up paralyzed for, I think it was a good 15 years she suffered, but always with joy. And she offered up her suffering for the salvation of souls, because these saints, they understand that suffering is so salvific. Suffering saves souls. Suffering draws down so much grace. Why? Because it unites them to Jesus on the cross. Because remember, all suffering now has become Christ's suffering. When he died on the cross, when he was in his passion, especially all his life, his divine knowledge, he took to himself the suffering of the future, you could say, the suffering of the past. Everything became his. So when we suffer, we say, "Lord, thank you for letting me taste your suffering," because it's his before we even experienced it. So Rafqa had that, and there were many stories around her life. So just to say, she had a huge devotion to the Eucharist. And one day, Feast of Corpus Christi, she wanted so much to go to Mass, but the sisters couldn't bring her, she couldn't move. And while she heard the Mass going on, she regained temporarily motion in her legs. She was able to crawl on the floor. And as she came, the sisters parted. It was time for communion, and the priest gave her communion. And I'll send you a picture of it. A very powerful moment in Rafqa's life. When she died, the sisters mourned for her because she was so sweet, so gentle. And one of the Mother Spirit got cancer. And Rafqa came to her in a dream and told her, take the dirt from her tomb and bless herself and even eat it, as like Our Lady told Saint Bernadette. And she was cured of her cancer. And now people have experienced miracles from the soil from the tomb of Rafqa. So we ask Saint Rafqa to help us to embrace the suffering with joy in our life and give it to God.